Welcome to MTG Pro Tutor, the podcast that gathers high-level tactics by talking to your favorite Pro Tour Magic players. Whether you're just beyond starter decks or a hardcore grinder, we'll draw strategies you can use today to build stronger decks with killer results. Play like a pro here at MTG Pro Tutor. Now, welcome the man with an unbeatable force of will, your thought courier and demonic tutor, Sean Penrod.
Hello and welcome. How are you doing this fine day? Did you catch the GPs over the weekend? There were 3 of them, and 2 of them were won by Eldrazi. They were all the modern format, by the way. 2 of them were won by Eldrazi decks. And the third one, which is the one that I was able to see the finals for, an Eldrazi deck was in the finals, but it did not win. So we had 3 Modern Grand Prix, 2 won by Eldrazi, and then finally a different deck won. It was a Coco Chord deck. It was really cool to see. I'm just happy to see a different deck do well because everyone's been stomping face with this Eldrazi stuff. So it was refreshing to see a different deck. Today we have Darwin Kastle joining us, another Hall of Famer and Mr. Avalanche Rider himself. Go look up the card Avalanche Rider, that's him, and we will talk about that in the interview for sure. But before we dive into that, I do want to say that Shadows over Innistrad is just around the corner. In fact, they have started releasing the story on Uncharted Realms. And because it is a new story arc, I am going to be doing a sample episode of the audio version of Uncharted Realms. I talked about this a little bit ago. I've mentioned it on social media, and the response has been really positive. You guys seem to like the idea and want to hear it, and I'm very excited to do it. So I am working with professional talent here locally in the LA area. We're going to get voice actors and amazing sound effects. We're going to get music beds. We're going to put it all together and make a fantastic audio-rich experience. I'm going to be perfectly honest, this will not be a cheap endeavor, and I'm going to produce the first episode on my own just to see how it's received by the Magic community at large. If this is something that you want to see more of, then we're going to have to band together to make it happen. I will set up a separate Patreon page, and if we hit a certain milestone, I will be able to produce an episode every single week. I'll be completely honest with everybody, I would love this project to work. I think it will be amazing. The talent that we're working with is fantastic, and it will really, really be a special thing. But again, we're all going to have to band together to make it happen, because I am all about paying people what they are worth and what they deserve, and we're going to have amazing professionals doing voices and sound effects and things like that, and I definitely want them to be well compensated for their hard work. So stick around. I'll definitely announce it as it gets closer. We are doing, the sample episode will be episode 1 of the Shadows over Innistrad storyline, so we're working on that now, and it will be released as a bonus episode here on MTG Pro Tutor. And when it does, the best way that you guys can help is by spreading that episode so a lot of people can hear it, so we can see what the feedback is going to be, and then again, if we get enough support, it will be a regular deal. Other than that, I do want to give a quick shout out to Matthew, the patron who won the Oath of the Gatewatch Fat Pack for February. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the show. I really appreciate it, and that is in the mail headed your way. So if you want to support the show directly and be considered for any future drawings, then go ahead and go to mtgprotutor.com/Patreon and sign up there. Well, that's it for the top of the interview stuff. I'm really excited to chat with Darwin, so let's bring him in, sit down, and talk about Magic. What's up, everybody? I am super stoked to have our guest with us today. Our guest has an impressive Magic record with 8 Pro Tour top 8s, including becoming the champion of Pro Tour Washington, D.C. in 1999. He also has 6 Grand Prix top 8s, including 1 win and a win at the 1998 Invitational. And it's no wonder that he's been inducted into the Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame with the inaugural class of 2005. Coming to us from Massachusetts, the Avalanche Rider himself, Darwin Kastle. Darwin, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Sean?
Fantastic. Are you ready to delve into your mind and share with the audience tips and tricks to take their game to the next level?
Definitely.
Sweet. Now, Prodigies out there, if you want to connect with Darwin, the best way to do that is on Twitter. He's at Darwin Kastle. And then he's also on Facebook too. You can look him up there. Both are, he's pretty active in, but Twitter is usually the easiest. You can just send out, say thank you, ask him questions about Magic, things like that. And if I messed up a little bit in that intro, I know that pros like you often are adding to your accolades and top 8s and things like that. So I hope I got all that right, but we're really excited to have you with us, Darwin.
Awesome. Yeah, close enough. I have 2 GP wins, but one of them was a team GP.
Okay. I thought there was something else there. Now, what do you have going on right now outside of Magic? I know that you're a game designer and stuff like that. So is that pretty much what you do?
myself and another Hall of Famer, Rob Doherty, started our own company making games, and we have two big products out at the moment. One's a deck building game called Star Realms, which has won a whole bunch of Game of the Year awards and is doing quite well. Our more recent project is the Epic card game, which plays a lot more like a trading card game and will scratch the sort of itch that Magic players are looking to scratch. The difference is you get the whole game with one purchase. It's not something you have to buy in random packs. And also just it plays extremely well. Like I've never played a trading card game that plays as smoothly. So I recommend your listeners go out and try the Epic card game.
Is it all the cards in one pack and that's it? Or is it like an LG, like a living card game where there's continuous packs, but you know exactly what you're getting?
It definitely has similarities to living card games. That's like a trademark term or whatever, so we don't use it. But basically, you buy for $15, you get 120 unique cards, one of every card in the base set. And so, like, for example, for Constructed, you can play up to 3 copies of a card. So if you bought 3 boxes, you'd own a complete play set for Constructed. You own 3 copies of every card. Plus, it makes for a great cube draft if you buy 3 copies of the game, because now you can build a cube with up to 3 copies of the commons and however many copies of the rares you want to use, because you get, like I said, one of everything. So it's a really great drafting game. And then, we do release expansions, much like you say living card games do, but the expansions don't have any randomness. So we might release expansions in packs, but the packs are not random packs. They all have, they say right on the back what comes in the pack.
Right. So if you don't want those cards or don't need them, you don't buy it, and you know exactly what you're getting.
Exactly. Awesome. So it really allows you to be a completist without having to spend hundreds of dollars.
Awesome. Well, that's really cool. So again, everybody go check out those games from Darwin and other Hall of Fame. You said Rob Doherty. That's really cool. You guys have collaborated and come out with these neat additions to the gaming world. We love it. So here on MTG Pro Tutor, we love stories. We really love using stories to close the gap between where we are and where you are, because you have obviously a long and storied history with Magic the Gathering, and we want to draw on that. So let's go all the way back to the very beginning. Darwin, what was your first introduction to Magic? When was the first time that you saw cards?
I was a senior at Syracuse University in 1994, and my big hobby was collecting comic books at the time. And one day I went to the comic book shop, and the guy who worked there showed me that they now were selling this thing called Magic the Gathering, and insisted he'd tried it and it was awesome and I should try it. Unfortunately, part of his pitch was that it was very addictive. And at the time, as a senior in college, I was trying to finish up, my schooling, do some, last minute pursuing of relationships, and also was using all my extra money on things like comic books and CDs. So the idea of getting into something addictive didn't sound great at the time, but he did convince me to go to the local coffee shop and watch him and his friends play. I distinctly remember it was a group game, which is probably one of the reasons it didn't blow me away, because I'm more of a one-on-one game player. But I distinctly remember someone targeting someone else with a black vice, which seemed interesting. But it didn't sell me on it at the time. But after I graduated that summer, I was visiting an ex-girlfriend who also loved the game and was telling me great things about it. And she gave me a copy of the rule book. And I had a lot more free time in the summer, and I read the rulebook from cover to cover, and it sounded interesting enough that I went out and bought a bunch of revised packs and then started teaching my friends to play with me.
Wow, that's really cool. So the first packs that you got were revised?
Yep.
Wow, that's really neat. So since you've been around since almost the beginning, and you said 94, that's really cool. Do you have like Power 9?
I don't currently. So So over time, I started to acquire them. At first, I didn't have any of them because I wasn't in alpha and beta and unlimited. But back then, the only type of Magic was really I guess we would call it vintage now. At the time we just called it Magic. But basically everyone had the Power 9, but I did not. And I was doing well for not having the Power 9, but I found myself unable to win tournaments without them. It became a goal of mine to win a tournament without them. And I finished second in several relatively large tournaments where, like, this is before the Pro Tour, so having like $1,000 first prize was considered a big deal back then. But eventually I gave up and gradually started buying like beat up Moxes here and there at cheap prices until the very first tournament I played in after I completed my Power 9, I won. And so, like, there's definitely a correlation between, having access to all the cards and having a better chance of winning. Although I was very proud of myself in almost winning a bunch of tournaments without them.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, I gradually, at that point, I then used my deck, which had the Power 9, to win Mox tournaments where they were giving away like mint Moxes, so I could like upgrade my Power 9 and then sell my crappy ones. But my Magic collection got so big that when I moved from one apartment to the next, I'd require an entire van load just for my Magic collection.
Wow.
And at some point, I got offered a contract job at Upper Deck Entertainment out in California. And I really wanted the job, so I decided to take it. But that meant driving all the way from Massachusetts to California to live out there. And I decided if I couldn't fit something in one carload that I was going to drive out there, I no longer wanted to own it. So I sold off my entire Magic collection at that point before driving to the West Coast. And at the time, Moxes were worth hundreds of dollars. Never occurred to me they'd now be worth, thousands of dollars. But yeah, so I sold off my Magic collection. And now when I'm playing in a constructed event, I usually just have to borrow the cards. Occasionally, I'll have to buy a few cards here or there. But fortunately, I have lots of friends who are Magic players who have prodigious Magic collections. And there's usually someone who's excited about the idea of a Hall of Famer playing their deck at a Pro Tour or something.
Yes, of course. Now, were they called Power 9 back then, or is that just a name that we use now to refer to those cards?
But by that point, they were, yes.
Okay. And were they all played in the same deck? Or they were just the 9 most powerful cards at that time, but were they all in one single deck?
Basically, at that point, everyone played all of the Moxes and Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall. Not every deck had Time Twister. Pretty much every deck had Time Walk. I remember, thinking that there were, like, I actually had a deck for a while where I owned a Time Walk and I wasn't playing with Time Walk because, I didn't feel that, like, it was as good as, the other, cards for the deck, but lots of people thought it was absurd, but it was just something I was trying. But in general, if you owned those cards, you were playing them. Occasionally, you might build like a mono black deck that somehow didn't really have enough blue mana to support the power blue, but usually it was correct to try and find a way to get the blue mana to play those cards. So in general, people winning tournaments were playing with the entire Power 9.
Now, you came in back at Revise, and you played obviously a lot since then. What's what's your favorite set? Do you have one?
Well, I'm a little biased because of Avalanche Riders. So I guess my favorite set would be any set that had Avalanche Riders in it, which there have been multiple sets with Avalanche Riders.
I guess since we're on that topic, let's talk about that. So back in the day, I guess it wasn't too long ago, the last one was Snapcaster Mage, but they had these things called Magic Invitationals, Prodigies, for those of you who don't know. And they were, as they sound, special events where players got invited to come, and the winner got to design a card, and his likeness was always put in the card. And Darwin, you won, was it the second one, or which invitational did you win?
Yeah, so basically I won the second invitational. Some people don't realize there was a second one because the prize you got, as you mentioned, was being able to design your own card, and the first winner, Oli Roddy, didn't immediately design a card for his win. So Avalanche Riders was actually the first invitational card made. I think it was only when Oli saw how cool that was that later he went on to design his own invitational card. So yeah, it was the second invitational, but the first invitational card.
Excellent. Now, Where was that Invitational held? And like, tell us a little bit about that. Who was there and how'd that go?
That Invitational was held in Rio de Janeiro, and it was very cool to get an invite. I think the first one was in Hong Kong, but basically the Wizards of the Coast flew all the invitees, I think there were 16 of us, down to Rio. And they put us up in a 5-star hotel with like magnificent pools and stuff, and amazing restaurant stuff. And they'd take us out to dinner, and it was just really awesome. And you were hanging out with 15 other incredible Magic players. I believe I was roommates with, I want to say Chris Bakula at that one. It might have been Brian Hacker. Anyways, but it was cool hanging out with all these amazing Magic players. And then on top of that, it was a multi-day tournament, which was multiple formats. So it was both multiple constructed formats and multiple limited formats. So it involved if you were going to take it seriously, it involved amazing prep time. Like, one of the formats was extended. So it was called extended back then. I don't even think that format exists now, but basically I had to prepare for that, which took a lot of preparation. There was also a format involving Vanguard cards I had to prepare for.
Oh my gosh.
Standard was one of the formats. Plus there was one of the limited formats was sealed, where everyone had the same sealed pool, and it involved
that's interesting.
A relatively powerful sealed pool. Then there was another sort of draft format. I don't remember what it was, but there was like I said, about 5 formats. And so I had to bring 3 constructed decks with me. I've never played in a tournament that required 3 constructed decks. But I guess maybe I think I took the honor more seriously than some did. So I think one of the reasons I did so well is I spent a lot of time preparing, and I had a lot of friends playtesting with me and stuff. So I brought 3 extremely polished decks with me. My extended deck was so good that not only did I not lose a game in the extended portion, I then loaned it to John Finkel, who was there for a Grand Prix. And while we were playing in the Invitational, he won the Grand Prix with it.
Nice.
So yeah, my extended deck was quite good. I was playing a combo deck for the Vanguard format. I was playing a Cadaverous Bloom Drain deck because I chose a Vanguard card that allowed me to see my opponent's hand and allowed me to start with extra cards, which for a deck like Bloom Drain, both those things are absolutely amazing, and I did well in that format. I also did relatively well in Standard, although I don't think that was one of my better formats. One of the most interesting parts is once after the 5 formats, the top 2 players at that point were then the finalists, and they each submitted from starting with first choice what their top 3 choices of formats were, and then whichever format was the closest to the top choice for both players was the format you played for the finals. And the format we ended up agreeing upon was sealed deck with the shared sealed pool, and it was using the same sealed pool we just used, which actually worked out really in my favor. I was playing against Jakob Schlemmer from the Czech Republic, and I had basically, in my opinion, absolutely nailed what the correct build was in the Swiss. And so I was playing this powerful red-blue deck with lots of burn and lots of permission and lots of big flyers. And he had a very different, sort of maybe a red-green build or something that he'd done relatively well with in the Swiss. But I think this was best of 5, so I crushed that build of his. He sideboarded to a blue-black version that his friends had coached him was better, and he did better, but I still crushed him. So then he sideboarded to basically my build, and by then it was too late because I was already up 2 games to nothing.
Yes.
But that was a really fun format.
Wow.
And the whole tournament was a blast. I got a little sick by the end of the trip, but by then the tournament was over, and my victory helped me deal with my pain.
Buoyed you up. So then, when it came to Avalanche Riders, what was the inspiration behind that? How did that go, and why did you choose, a creature that destroys the land with haste? How did that process come about?
Back then, 187 creatures weren't nearly as ubiquitous as they are now, but we had things like Necrotal and Man of War at that point, and I loved those cards. In particular, Necrotal. Necrotal was one of my favorite cards, and so I wanted to make something like Necrotal. And besides black, my favorite color was red at the time. So I decided I wanted to build a red Necrotal. So my original design was 2 red and 2, much like Necrotal is 2 black and 2. And basically, instead of First Strike, I gave it Haste because I felt that was a more flavorful ability for red. Right. And instead of destroying a non-black creature when it came into play, I had it destroy a land because I also thought that was more in flavor for red. And much like Necrotal, it was a 2/1. And so the original design didn't have Echo because Echo wasn't a thing yet. But basically, at that particular set, the designers were introducing Echo as a mechanic, and they were putting it on creatures that had 187 abilities or come into play abilities, I guess. And they felt it would be a good fit for Avalanche Riders, so they talked to me about it. And we decided that if we're going to do that, we needed to make it a little better. So instead of being 2 red and 2, it became 1 red and 3. And instead of being a 2/1, it became a 2/2 to make up for the drawback of Echo. And the only real disagreement we had for a while was with the name. Basically, their feeling was that Avalanche Rider evoked the idea of a snow-related avalanche. Frankly, some of the ones I talked to didn't even realize you could have an avalanche without snow. And in the storytelling they were doing at the time, the red creatures were in a part of the area where there was no snow and lots of heat and fire. And so they weren't sure if that was a good name. So they asked me to come up with a bunch of alternate names. And eventually I just insisted that that name was too cool not to use. And that I think I emailed them some Wikipedia description of Avalanche or whatever. So they realized you didn't have to have snow for it. And fortunately they came around.
Wow, that's awesome. And did you call the Enter the Battlefield effect, you say a 187?
Yeah, so
is that the rule number?
Necrotal, I think, was one of the first creatures that had a come into play effect like that. And so what people ended up doing is they would talk about how Necrotal would 187 your creature, the idea being that at the time, 187 was like the police code for homicide. And so the idea was Necrotal would murder your opponent's creature. And after that, they just started referring to all come into play effects as 187 effects.
That's awesome. See, I thought it was referring to the rule paragraph or something, but that's even cooler. The homicide code 187. I mean, as you know, nowadays we just, for shorthand, we just say ETB, Enter the Battlefield, but 187 I think that's way cooler.
Yeah, I still call it that. And most of the time people know what I'm talking about.
That is really neat. I'm glad that we got a little glimpse into that. That's way cool. Now, you've mentioned a couple cards already, but maybe it's one of those and maybe it's not, but what is one of your favorite cards?
Well, if we're not going with Avalanche Rider, because that's sort of the obvious answer, it would probably be Frenetic Efreet, which is an interesting choice because in general, I absolutely hate coin tossing in Magic. All the sort of goblin-related cards that involve coin tossing, I want to toss into the garbage. I hate them so much. I really feel like that kind of randomness isn't why I play Magic and isn't what Magic's about for me. But I feel that Frenetic Efreet is, what at the time was a reasonably good creature for me. I think these days creatures have gotten so good that Frenetic Efreet wouldn't be considered that good. But at the time, I was playing it in Vintage and people were playing decks with lots of lightning bolts and stuff like that. And sure, worst case scenario, they used their removal spell and my creature died. But the fact that perhaps the removal spell would be wasted was amazing. And one of the things that got in their heads because they're like, well, maybe it's only hitting me for 2. Maybe I shouldn't waste my lightning bolt on it type thing. And it actually created some very entertaining games and was quite good for me.
Now, what is that card for those of us who don't know?
It's a 2/1 flyer for a red, a blue, and a colorless. And for, 0 colon or whatever, basically whenever you feel like it, you can phase it out and flip a coin. And if you win the coin flip, it phases back in. If you lose the coin flip, it goes to your graveyard.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so basically it was a 2/1 flyer for 3 that about half the time survive whatever attempt your opponent made to kill it, and also made for an intriguing blocker. Like if they attacked with a Juzam Jin, like a giant creature like that, you could block, then phase it out, and perhaps, you'd have your Frenetic Efreet back to attack with.
That's really impressive. That's neat. Yeah, like you said, it incorporated that kind of zany coin tossing thing that they used to do way back then. So
right, but in a way that felt strategic enough for me that I didn't hate it.
That you didn't hate it. Awesome. Wow. So you've played lots of different sets, played lots of different cards, and you've played for many years. What makes Magic fun for you? Like, what kept you around back then, and what keeps you involved? And what was so fun about Magic?
Initially, there just wasn't anything like it. Like there were no, like, I had played a lot of chess in college.
Okay.
I never tried to become a ranked chess player or anything, but that definitely appealed to a major part of my psyche. I really liked the competition. I played lots of more traditional card games like Euchre and Hearts, and so I liked the competition, but I also liked the strategy of it. And here we had a game that really tapped into many levels of strategy, whether it was the deck building or the playing, but also had a fantasy theme. And I, being a big nerd, I liked fantasy and science fiction and stuff, so that was cool. So the combination of the fantasy theme and the strategy, and I really liked the deck building aspect of it, so that appealed to it. But going forward, I found, because obviously there's lots of strategy games out there now, part of it was the community. Most of my best friends I've met through Magic, and most of my best friends are Magic players. And on top of that, it's the high-level play that really got me, because initially there were no tournaments, or at least I didn't know of them. But once I discovered tournaments, I got really hooked. And then what with the Pro Tour, I would get in situations where I'd be playing a game, and the outcome of the game had literally thousands of dollars on the line. And that was an incredible rush for me, especially given that it was doing something that I was good at and had a certain amount of control over. It wasn't like, playing in a casino, some game in a casino where I have very little control over the outcome. This was a game of skill and strategy that I was really good at, and, could use that to my advantage. And I just got a real rush out of high level competition playing a game that was both fun and I was good at it.
Excellent. So deck building, strategy, and the community, all those things came together for a perfect blend in a then very unique game that just kept you around and kept you hooked.
Yep.
Excellent. So what is an aspect of Magic that you were terrible at when you first started that you eventually overcame? Because obviously you didn't start out as the Hall of Famer that we know now. What can you share with us that we can learn from?
When I first started playing Magic, as I mentioned, there was only one format, and it was a constructed format. There's no such thing as limited play when I first started playing. And eventually, I remember I was trying to prepare for Nationals, because this was before the Pro Tour, so Nationals and Worlds were the big thing. I remember reading about Zach Dolan winning the first World Championship in the Cyborg magazine or something, and thinking, oh my God, this is what I want to do. And I was trying to get ready for Nationals, so I was playing in Northeast Regionals to try and qualify for Nationals. And I had an amazing constructed deck that I won every round with. But at Regionals, they also introduced a new format called Sealed Deck that I'd never heard of before. And on top of that, we were playing for ante in the Sealed Deck. And not only did I not really know what I was doing, I was losing land in ante, so it was just snowballing and getting worse. And so I ended up doing so badly in Sealed that it didn't matter that I went undefeated in Constructed. So I did not qualify for Nationals through that tournament. And my friend who was playing the constructed deck that I designed actually ended up winning Northeast Regionals that year because he did reasonably well in Sealed. So I was like, wow. And then at Nationals that year, they also played Sealed. And so that was a big deal. So I was like, wow, if the tournaments I really care about, like Nationals and Regionals, are going to use this new, Sealed deck format that I'm so terrible at, if I'm going to do well in these tournaments, I'm going to have to figure out how to be good at it. So I then ended up basically playing in every single Sealed deck tournament that I had the opportunity to play in. I remember there was one weekend where I played in a tournament on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and that included 3 different states. So like
Wow.
I played in a tournament in Massachusetts on one day, and then I played in a tournament in like New Hampshire. Then I played in a tournament in like Vermont or something. And then I played another tournament in Massachusetts or something at 4 different locations. And basically, it was just one of those things where I was determined to get good at it. And so at every opportunity where I could play that format in a competitive way, I did. And, you know, I took my lumps, but by just doing a lot of it and talking to other people who were clearly better at it and getting their advice, you know, I sort of brute forced it. And a lot of the skill sets I'd used to get good at constructed carried over. I just, you know, this was a new thing to me. And so I had to, you know, put my mind into it. And it's funny because after about a year of the Pro Tour, when I had 2 limited top 8s, people were referring to me as a limited specialist, which I found laughable given how it's been my Achilles heel.
That's interesting because just off of your story, I was like, okay, so, you know, I would have pegged you as like a really good deck builder because you mentioned a couple of times how you were good at constructing and putting together a deck that really performed well. And so, but that's really interesting how you turned, you know, your Achilles heel into something that people recognize as, oh, he's a good limited player. You know, that's awesome.
Well, also, one of my goals had been to eventually win Worlds, one of my goals I did not achieve. But one of the things that made Worlds special back then was it involved both limited and constructed formats. Because back then, Pro Tours were either limited or constructed. So being a limited specialist or a constructed specialist was kind of an option. Like you could either skip some of the Pro Tours or just do better in some than others. But since I wanted to win Worlds, it was really necessary for me to be good at both. I didn't achieve that goal, but I did achieve the goal of becoming good at both limited and constructed.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. That's so neat to see how the games evolved and the tournaments have evolved over time. So when did so was it this time that you were going around to all these tournaments and whatnot, but when was there a time that you really experienced the most growth as a player, that you really changed how you saw or played the game?
Well, I mean, that's probably the time when I sort of added limited to my skill set. Another big time was after the first Pro Tour. So I managed to get I was one of the people calling to try and sign up for the first Pro Tour, and I managed to get on the waiting list, and then I managed to get an invite from the waiting list. So I played in the first Pro Tour, but I did terrible. My deck was terrible. We had a very, I guess, inbred testing group because one of the people I tested with was Mike LeConte, who actually ended up winning the first Pro Tour. And my deck matched up really well against his deck. But, you know, there were very few people at the actual tournament playing decks like Mike's, which worked out great for Mike as he won the tournament. But it worked out poorly for me because my deck was, in general, terrible. Like Mike was playing a Millstone deck, which I would sideboard in Necropotence and against because he wasn't doing any damage to you. So Necropotence was amazing. And there were people at the first Pro Tour who were main decking Necropotence and had their decks built around it, which would have been much better than what I did. I had this like crazy 3-color deck with tons of 6 casting cost creatures and stuff. And it was just really awful. But I had such an amazing experience at the Pro Tour that I sort of rededicated myself to getting good at Magic. And it was so exciting when they introduced this new format called Booster Draft that I'd never heard of before. And unlike with Sealed, I had the chance to prepare because this was going to be a Pro Tour format. And so I had time between Pro Tours to learn the format, and I actually really took to it. And at the very first draft tournament, I actually finished third. I lost to Sean Hammer-Regnier, who eventually ended up winning the Pro Tour. But basically, that's when I really started to make my mark in professional Magic. I was right after the first Pro Tour when I sort of rededicated myself to becoming the best Magic player I could be.
Love it. Absolutely love it. The Magic journey for everybody is unique, and it's full of highs and it's full of lows. And on your journey, can you share your worst moment, your worst Magic moment? Maybe it's the worst near miss that you had, or just something from there. And more than just to dwell on it, what did you learn from that, and what can you share with us?
my worst moment would have to be at an extended Pro Tour New Orleans where I was playing Kai Bude in the top 8. I was playing a black deck that was about reanimating gigantic creatures from my graveyard very early in the game. And Kai Bude was playing a combo deck around 2 cards, Illusions and Donate. Illusions of Grandeur is a 4 casting cost blue enchantment that gains you 20 life when it comes into play. And Donate is a 3 casting cost blue sorcery that allows you to give one of your permanents to your opponent's control, whether they like it or not.
Right.
And the drawback of Illusions of Grandeur is it has a cumulative upkeep of 2 mana. So you play for 4 mana and gain 20 life. That's fantastic. But next turn you have to pay 2 or it goes away and you lose that 20 life. And the turn after that you have to pay 4 or it goes away and you lose that 20 life. The turn after that you have to pay 6 or it goes away. So basically it quickly goes from being awesome to being terrible, the fact that at any moment. And the thing is, it's amazing if you donate it to your opponent because your opponent never gained the 20 life. So when they lose 20 life, they just die.
Oh my gosh, really?
Right. So basically, the whole goal of his deck was for him to gain 20, then give you the illusions that you have to pay the cumulative upkeep for. So you're trying to kill somebody who's at 40 while at the same time using all of your mana to not lose 20.
Wow, you're building it up. I'm like, okay, where's he going with this? Obviously, he's gonna give it, and I didn't know that's how it worked. So that's crazy.
Basically, so what happened was my deck had a great draw in game 1 against Kai. This is in the first round of the top 8, so this is the quarterfinals, and I got out a enchantment called Zombie Infestation that allows you to discard cards from your hand to create zombie tokens. And I used it to get this giant dragon into my discard pile called Proudest, and I reanimated that. And the great thing about Proudest, it was in my deck specifically for this matchup, is that if it damages your opponent, you can pay, I think it's a blue and 2, and your opponent has to discard all cards of a color of your choice, and Kai was playing mono blue, so I got the Proudest in play on like turn 2 or something and attacked him with it on turn 3, or maybe I got it in play on turn 1 and attacked him. I think I got it in play on turn 2 and attacked him with it on turn 3 and had exactly 3 mana, and I chose blue, so he had to discard his entire hand. So the only things he had in play at that point was mana. So I believe he had out this 2 casting cost artifact that made all of his blue spells cheaper, and he had 4 islands in play, I think, at this point. So perhaps like he went first, and I attacked him on my turn 4 or something like that. So basically, the issue was he was dead on the board. Between my zombies and my dragon, I was going to win next turn, and he had no cards in hand. And due to various spells he'd cast and the fact that I made him discard his whole hand, he only had 1 donate left in his deck, although he did have 3 Illusions of Grandeur left in his deck. But he could only draw 1 of them because he had no cards in the hand. So,
right.
Because he was dead on the board, the only card that would help him would be if he drew one of his 3 Illusions of Grandeur. So, and he still had quite a few cards left in his deck because it was, like turn 4 or 5. But fortunately for him, he did draw one of his 3 Illusions of Grandeur. So he taps 3 of his 4 land or whatever and plays it and gains 20 life. So he's no longer going to die on my next turn.
Right.
I create more zombies and I untap my dragon and my zombies, and I now attack for so much that he's dead on the board again. So he'll now die on the following turn. So he uses 2 of his 4 islands to upkeep the Illusions of Grandeur. Relevant to this story, I'm stalled at 3 mana. So if for some reason he gives me the illusions, I will die immediately because during my upkeep I won't be able to pay the 4 mana that's required to pay it.
So the upkeep continues as well. It doesn't reset.
It's a cumulative upkeep, and it doesn't matter if it changes control. So he just paid 2. So the next person who has to upkeep it will have to pay 4, whether it's him or whether he gives it to me. All right. The problem he's facing is, while he has exactly enough mana to cast Donate because he's tapped 2 of his islands, he's got 2 islands plus the artifact that makes blue spells 1 cheaper. So he has exactly enough mana to cast Donate. The problem he's facing is he only has 1 Donate left in his entire deck, And if he draws a search card, he doesn't have enough mana to cast both the search card and the donate. So, and he's dead on the board, and drawing another illusions won't help him. All right, because among things, he doesn't have enough mana to cast another illusions. So the only card that will help him is the last remaining donate in his deck, and he's already gotten lucky to have drawn illusions the turn before. But basically, Kai being Kai is like, he'd never lost a match on a day 3 of a Pro Tour before. He'd already won multiple Pro Tours at this point. He's quite the showman, so he decides that since the only card that can help him is donate, why not assume it's donate? So he takes the card off the top of his deck, sets it face down in front of us, the camera's on us, and then he, with a dramatic flourish, he flips it over saying, donate. And sure enough, it is donate. He passes the 2 islands, he donates the illusions to me, and I lose immediately, and then he easily wins the next 2 games to take the match. I was so shattered. It was so devastating that he then played my teammate in the next round and crushed my teammate in 3 games straight. Like, the only close game was that one, and I thought I totally hit him. The math of him drawing the exact 2 cards he needed in the exact order he needed is astronomical. One of my friends did it at some point. It was, in the many hundreds to 1 of him doing it. So, good for him, but that had to be the most painful Pro Tour moment for me.
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, obviously now, however, almost 20 years later, like, it's an amazing story, but at the time you must have been like, are you kidding me?
Pretty much. I mean, it's one of those things where it was spectacular to make the top 8 of another Pro Tour, but I'd still never won a Pro Tour. I'd had 2nd place, I had 3rd place, but never won an individual Pro Tour. And so I was really excited that this would be the one, and it was a painful way to go.
So on the flip side, the highs that we experience, what is your proudest Magic moment?
So it's hard to say what my proudest, but certainly the moment that was the most exciting for me was winning the first team Pro Tour in Washington, D.C. At the time, the 2 people I did the most testing with were future Hall of Famer Dave Humphries and future Hall of Famer Rob Doherty. And so the 3 of us were best friends. We tested all the time together for Pro Tours, and all 3 of us were good at draft. And when they announced that there was going to be a team draft format and a team draft Pro Tour, we kind of felt like they invented the format for us because, 3-man teams, well, there's exactly 3 of us. And, we were considered 3 of the best players in the Northeast, and all 3 of us had made top 8s in individual Pro Tours. And we were used to working together, so we prepared together. And the night before the tournament, Dave asked us what the prize was for first place. He didn't ask us what the prize was for 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. He just asked what's the prize for first place, because he was so, we were really, in it to win it. And it was exciting because each team had to have an A player, a B player, and a C player. And I don't remember whether I was the A or the C player, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is whenever we played John Finkel's team, he was the player I had to play. And we played him twice. We played him once on day 1 and then once in the top 8. I think in the semifinals we had to play his team. And it was very exciting for me because I took him down both times, and that obviously helped our team advance to the finals. It was rough for Rob because on the final day he got incredibly sick to the point where we would do all the draft choices for him. So it was Rochester draft. So you could sort of silently communicate amongst yourselves as you're drafting. You weren't allowed to say anything, but you could point at things. So like Dave and I would point at the card we wanted Rob to draft. And he was so sick, he'd just take whatever card we pointed at. And then we would build his deck for him while he tried to hold it together during deck construction. We were in a room secluded for deck building, and the head judge walks in the room, this fellow named Jeff Dene, and he walks over to where Dave and I are sitting at the table building our decks, and he says, "Where's Rob?" And we're like, "Look down." And Rob was curled up on the floor in agony.
Oh, no.
So we purposely drafted him really fast, aggressive decks in hopes that his matches would be over quickly. But in the finals, what happened was Rob just tried not to lose until Dave and I both won our matches and he could stop playing. But it was a really powerful weekend, but it was just so amazing to not only win my first Pro Tour, and it was the first Pro Tour win for all 3 of us, but to win it with my two best friends, it was just a really epic and amazing weekend, and really unforgettable for me, and really exciting.
Wow, that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. That's so neat. Like you said, the first Pro Tour win for all three of you, and the fact that it was with your friends and you got to do that. And what great support that you guys gave to Rob while he was sick, and you were able to help him out. That's absolutely amazing how you guys came together and pulled it off. I love how you said that he just tried not to lose until you guys are done, because then you can come and help him finish his game, basically.
Basically, once we were done, we'd won 2 out of 3, so his match became meaningless at that point.
Got it.
So he could just stop playing.
Then you come over and coach him along because he was sick.
You weren't allowed in that format. You weren't allowed to comment on your opponent's game. You could communicate a little bit during the draft itself, but you couldn't communicate during the gameplay.
Got it. And that's different from now, where you can.
I don't. I guess. I've definitely.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that they do team events, but I'll have to look up to see.
Things have definitely evolved over time, so you probably can. Certainly if you're playing like Two-Headed Giant, there's lots of communication. That format you couldn't communicate during the games.
So in all these years of playing Magic, Darwin, what was the deepest thing that you learned about yourself from playing Magic?
That's a good question. I definitely learned both how competitive I was and how good I could be at a strategic game in a competitive environment. And Rob likes to talk about how I'm a completely different Magic player when there's money on the line. Like he says, when he's playtesting against me, it's much easier to beat me. He can tell what's in my hand at all times because I don't keep a poker face. And, basically he feels that when people play with me casually, they have no idea how good I actually am. But then once you actually put me in a Pro Tour with, lots of money on the line and serious competition, he feels my level of play goes up, many notches. And I definitely do feel that I'm able to rise to the occasion in high pressure situations. And that was, something I learned about myself. But I think the most lasting thing I got out of it was realizing that these skill sets could apply to life outside of Magic. So, for example, the fact that I was a good deck builder, both in Constructed and Limited, was relevant as a game designer. So I'm a professional game designer now, as we sort of mentioned at the top of the show. And the kind of mental skills I would use for building a complex deck or a deck that no one else had thought of or whatever is useful when you're trying to create a game. Especially, for example, with Epic, it's because Epic has a lot of similarities, because it's much like a trading card game. So a lot of the same thought processes go through in evaluating whether the card's too good or not good enough and stuff like that. So I found that my skills that I developed in my hobby could turn into something that I could use for my career. And now I'm having a successful career as a game designer, which is really exciting.
I love that. I love how you were able to, like you said, take those skills and apply them somewhere else. And that's really, really neat that you're doing just that. And here you are, making great games. That's awesome. So you, Darwin, have played thousands of matches by this point against hundreds of different players, and you've seen lots of different lines of play. And we, the Pro Tutor Prodigies, we love Magic. We're competitive. We want to win. We understand that we can't win every time, but we're disappointed if we're not learning, improving, and growing, and definitely winning along the way. So we want to ask you, what's the biggest mistake that you see players make, and then how can we avoid that mistake?
I mean, it's hard to narrow it down to one, but I think a lot of it just comes to having the right mental approach. I don't think enough players realize how tough the competition is, how tough it is to be an elite Magic player, and they don't realize how much of it is just putting in the work and putting in the hours, and they don't realize how many other people out there are doing it. So too often when they lose, they'll write it off to, I just got unlucky, when, sure, there is luck in Magic, but, if you're, losing consistently, it's not just luck. Like there's a reason why you see familiar faces in the top 8s of Pro Tours on a regular basis, because there's a lot of skill in it. And Tiger Woods didn't get good at golf by playing golf once in a while. He played golf all the time. Like there are professional Magic players out there who that's all they do, especially now that you've got Magic Online. They're playing for 8 or 10 hours a day every day. And, sure, not everyone does that, but not everyone's an elite Magic player. And so
right.
I think people don't put, I'm not recommending that being a professional Magic player is the way to go. Like, it's very hard, even if you're really good at Magic and put a lot of time in it, it's very hard to make a living doing that, nigh impossible. And I don't think enough people realize that. But sure, let's say you're independently wealthy or whatever, and you decide that this is just something that's important to you and something you want to do. And I respect that. I definitely, felt it was important to me at some point. If you're really serious about it, you got to put in the time. You got to play a lot. And you need to play a lot competitively. So, it's not enough to test with your friends. You've got to play in as many tournaments as possible, and preferably ones with big stakes who are going to have tough opponents. People will just play with their friends, where, when I was getting good, what I did was every time someone won a big tournament, I would go introduce myself to them and try and befriend them. So that way I would have friends who were tougher opponents and tougher play testers. So that way I could get better. You get better by playing people who are better than you. All right. And, as you get better, that might be harder to find people like that, but it's still important. And you're not going to get better unless you're playing against tough enough competition. And if you can't find friends like that, then you've got to go to tournaments where the tough competition can be found.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good. I like how you highlighted that. And what I really liked was that we've heard don't blame luck, several times. But what I got out of what you just shared was people not understanding that the amount of time and effort that other people put into it. And so when you lose, it's not just the luck of the draw. It's not just the variance. There is the hours upon hours that player has stacked into their preparation, and the amount of thought and effort that they put into their deck, and the time that they took to recognize the sequence of plays and the board states that are favorable for them and things like that you may or may not have done. And so, yeah, there is that variance that is involved. But when you add that to, or you stack that on top of the preparation that both players have put into it, then, like you said, that's why you see similar faces that pop up again and again, top 16, top 8 of the biggest tournaments.
And obviously it's not just preparation, talent and skill set matter, but preparation is something you have control over. You don't have control over how much talent you have or whether you've got the right skill set for it. So if you decide something that's important to you, you might as well focus on what you do have control over, which is how much you prepare and who you prepare with and what kind of preparation you do and how well you use that preparation time. I recently played in a pro tour, actually just a couple weeks ago, where I had a winning record with practically zero preparation. I played 2 drafts of that format and 2 or 3 practice games of Constructed. So, having a winning record of the Pro Tour was, pretty awesome given how little I prepared. But 1, Magic's very well suited to my skill set. And 2, I've been playing Magic for so many years that is a form of preparation. Having played all those games, this is a thing that I'm well versed in. I just wasn't well versed in those particular cards, right? But it didn't mean that I hadn't put in a lot of preparation over the course of my lifetime,
Yeah. And like you said, focus on the things that you can control, which is the amount of time that you put in and who you play with. And that's applicable. It doesn't matter what level you're at. If you're just, kitchen table Magic and you just kind of want to get, better, then, find someone at your local game store who is the best player there and start playing with them. If you're at your local game store and you want to go to the GP, then, find somebody, like you said, who has done well in that arena, who is better. That applies to to every skill.
And the big thing these days that I didn't have when I was, trying to get on the Pro Tour and do well was Magic Online. So now anyone can find top players to play against just by hopping online. I used to have a huge advantage over everyone because there were so many good Magic players in Boston to test with. And if you were from, the Australian Outback or something, maybe you couldn't find someone to test with. And so how could you become a top Magic player? Now all you need is the internet, and you can find top players to play against and to hone your game.
And when you are playtesting, more than just jamming reps, I'm assuming there's more to it. Is there a method or process or something that you can do to get the most out of your playtest sessions?
Yeah, ideally, yes. I used to be part of a large Magic team, which, there's still obviously things like that out there. And you don't need to be part of Team Channel Fireball to be part of a successful team. You just need people who are willing to commit the time and the effort. And what you do is you and your group of testers figure out what format you want to prepare for. And if it's a constructed format, you then need to start figuring out what are accepted as the best decks in that format and build them and play them so that you get people on your team who are good at playing those decks. So you then have a gauntlet of decks to test against. And then you need to start trying to innovate and find new decks that are good against the best decks in that gauntlet. So first you test the gauntlet to figure out, okay, these are the 3 best decks in our gauntlet. Now, what things do those 3 decks have in common, and what potential weaknesses do those 3 decks have in common? And you need to start, brainstorming with your team to figure out what decks you can come up with that might be able to be successful against all 3 of those decks. And then you just need to test the heck out of all of your ideas and see which ones are good. And if you can't find a good enough idea, you have to figure out which of those 3 decks is best for you and play one of those 3 decks.
Excellent. Yeah. Maximize on that time. And you just laid out a nice groundwork for us to follow. So that's great. Thank you. Now, as we pull into the home stretch here, because holy cow, we've been just chatting away and having a blast. Do you recommend any non-Magic activities that you feel will help players get better at Magic?
I find there's a very strong correlation between being good at chess and being good at Magic, and to a certain extent, being good at Texas Hold'em and being good at Magic. I think that they don't necessarily go in that direction. Like, I think being good at chess can help you become good at Magic, where being good at Magic can help you be good at Texas Hold'em. So I guess I recommend games like chess, anything that has lots of strategy. The nice thing about chess is there's essentially no luck involved. It's a pure strategy game. So you are just exercising your mind and your strategy skills and your ability to see things when you play a game like chess. And then, sure, when you play Magic, there'll be luck introduced, but luck's not something you need to practice.
And do you have an online Magic-related resource that you'd like to share with our listeners? Is there anywhere that you go to keep up to speed, or when you are, getting ready?
There's a bunch of sites I used to write for, and I guess most recently, I don't know. There isn't a specific site that I personally use. I guess not. Sorry.
No worries. So, looking forward to the future, what are some of the things that you have going on that you're excited about? On the Magic side of things, I guess because being a Hall of Famer, you are invited to every Pro Tour. Do you make it to every single one, or what is kind of that scene like for you?
I don't. So, I used to wonder why Magic was so dominated by young people. People in their teens and 20s, because I couldn't imagine not being a serious Magic player my entire life. So I just couldn't understand. But I now am one of the owners of White Wizard Games, and I now know what kind of time is involved in owning your own small business and how much time it takes to be successful owning your small business. And the amount of money you can make owning your own business is more than one would make as a professional Magic player. And so it's both hard to justify sinking lots of time into Magic and frankly, working on the kind of games I work on scratches a lot of the same itches. So for example, when I'm testing Epic decks, that easily scratches the itch of testing Magic for me. Among other things, there's no Mana Screw in Epic, or Mana Flood for that matter. So part of it, so I can now relate, if you've got a serious career, it's hard to be serious about Magic, which makes it very fortunate for me that I'm qualified for every Pro Tour, whether I put in the time or not. But basically what ends up happening is going to Pro Tour becomes in part a financial decision. Now, I love Magic and I love the Pro Tour, and I never regret going to a Pro Tour. Even if I don't make day 2, I really enjoy seeing the friends that I only get to see when I go to a major Magic event, and I still enjoy the thrill of the competition on day 1. All right, so I never regret going, but what ends up happening is I have to look at how far away is the tournament, how many days out of my life will it take me to go there, how expensive will it be to fly there, is it a format that I could do well without little preparation? Like, for example, the last Pro Tour, the constructed format was modern, and I could play an affinity deck that was exactly the same as when I played it multiple Pro Tours before. So I was already prepared to play a deck, and I had a friend with an affinity deck intact that he could hand me, and I could play it. So that was a format that didn't take much preparation. And the Pro Tour happened to be in Atlanta, which I live on the East Coast of the United States. So I get an appearance fee as part of being in the Hall of Fame. And the amount of money it took me to fly to Atlanta and stay at a hotel, even if I didn't finish the money, and despite having a winning record, I did miss the money, my appearance fee is still more than covered my expenses for the trip. Now, and I was able to talk to people about business there, when I wasn't playing, and I was able to do some networking and stuff. So it was worth it. But let's say there was a Pro Tour in Japan, that would be much harder to justify, because not only is it really expensive for me to fly there, and everything in Japan's expensive, but also that would be more days away from work. And, in a small business, you don't have a ton of people who can step in and do your job for you while you're not around,
Absolutely. And on the non-Magic side, what are you excited about moving forward? Is there like a new game or product that you're coming out with that you can share? If you can't, that's fine. But what do you have going on with your non-Magic stuff?
Just coming out now is the first expansion for Epic called Tyrants, and I'm excited to see how people feel about that. This one has a story to it. Like the first set was more basic. We've got monsters and events and stuff like that, but this one is telling a more specific story, and I think that will appeal to people. I'm the art director for the company, and I feel the art's always getting better, so I'm excited to see how people react to that. And we have new projects. Well, Star Realms and Epic are our only games out now. The nice thing about Star Realms is we have a digital version, which people can download for free and see whether they like it. We are working on a digital version of Epic, which I'm really excited about, but that's going to be a while before that's ready. I'm excited because in perhaps a month or two, or maybe less, we'll be releasing a digital version of a game called Cthulhu Realms, which is a game made by Tasty Minstrel Games and is already out in physical, and we're making the digital version of it. And I'm excited about that. That uses the Star Realms engine that I designed. And as far as physical goes, we have multiple new projects we're working on. One of which we'll be probably doing a Kickstarter for this spring. It will, I might be leaking a little bit here, but basically it's going to be a fantasy version of Star Realms. So I know a lot of people have been waiting for that for a long time, and it's coming.
Awesome. So there's lots of fun things that you have going on. And where can people go to keep in touch with that and connect with you and your company and stuff like that? Is there, which website can they go to?
Well, we currently have 3 websites. There's the company website, which is whitewizardgames.com. If you're interested in Epic, I recommend epiccardgame.com. Or if you're interested in Star Realms, I recommend starrealms.com.
Excellent. Now, Darwin, what is some last parting pieces of guidance that you want to share with us? Either something that you said already you want to emphasize, or something new that you want to leave here at the end.
I think that if you're going to be serious about Magic, you need to do it for the right reasons. It took me a while to sort of realize what the right reasons are. A good example of that is Grand Prix. I think there are people who go to Grand Prix thinking this is their way to the Pro Tour and Pro Tour fame. And it really isn't. Like, with the hundreds of people who go to a Grand Prix and the small number of slots and the level of competition, even if you're really good and have a really good card pool or a really good deck, your chances are minuscule. The reason to go to a Grand Prix is because you love playing Magic, you love playing in tournaments with tough competition, and you love the fact that you're going to be in a cool city with hundreds of people who share your interest and share your hobby that you can hang out with. All right. If you happen to do well, great. And you should plan for success and do what it takes to try and be successful. but that shouldn't be the only reason you're there.
Darwin, I want to acknowledge you for your contributions to the multiverse, and thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise. You are a hero among planeswalkers, and it's been a blast chatting with you. May you always draw what you need and depart every plane victorious.
I appreciate that, Sean, very much, and good luck to you and your readers. Thank you. Your listeners, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Darwin, for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it. I know the Prodigies learned a lot, and it was tons of fun chatting with you. As always, Prodigies, the show notes can be found at mtgprotutor.com/Darwin Kastle. I think it's so cool talking to people who have cards made after them. It's really neat. We had John Finkel back way as our second guest. He was episode 3 and 4, and he is Mr. Shadow Mage. And then now we have Darwin Kastle, who is Mr. Avalanche Rider. So it's pretty cool. Once again, I want to say congratulations to Matthew, our patron, who won the Oath of the Gatewatch Fat Pack for the month of February. And if you want to be considered for all future drawings, then head on over to mtgprotutor.com/Patreon and sign up there. You can pledge any amount, large or small, and you will be considered for all future drawings. And this year, there's going to be some really sweet stuff. I'm already thinking about Shadows over Innistrad Fat Packs, maybe some Eternal Master stuff. We have a From the Vault coming out this year, so that will be one of the giveaways. There's just some really neat product that I would love sharing with you all as a thank you for supporting the show directly. And once again, I'm making a sample episode of the audio version of Uncharted Realms. I still don't have a name yet for it. Obviously, I can't use Uncharted Realms, but the audio version of Uncharted Realms is going to happen. I'm doing the sample episode now. That will be coming out shortly, and the best way that you all can help, if it's something that you want to see more of, is spreading that episode like wildfire and then supporting it directly so that we can pay the voice actors and professionals that are going to make this amazing show a reality. I'll definitely keep you posted here on the podcast as well as on Twitter and Facebook so you know more details as to when it's coming out and where to go to support it. Well, that's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Stick around as we have a Wizard employee, Mike Turian, as our upcoming guest. Hope you have a fantastic day. Go do some spell slinging. I'm Sean Penrod, and we'll see you in the next cast.